Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're in Masechtas Nazir daf Chav Vav. We are going to begin on the bottom of Chav Ham and Beis, the second to last line. Omar halacha hi ben Nazir. So we said that when it comes to the din of a Nazir, if you have money that is set aside, but you didn't specify that it's for a particular carbon, so we said according to the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, that when it comes to these most stumin, that's a halacha Moshe Sinai, that even though all the money is mixed in together and some of it you would think is for a chatas and therefore you shouldn't be able to do this, we say it's okay. That nonetheless, because it's all b'chad bagta, because it's all for one purpose, as we're going to see, therefore the din is that it's yipul and nadava, it can all be brought as an olos nadava. So on this, the Gemara asks the following question. Is this the only time, in fact, that we see this din? Well, we see this elsewhere, not just by Nazir. Vasulo, so Amar halachi ben Nazir vasul leika, v'sanya v'sharchai v'kinim shebetoira. When it comes to the pair of birds, as the Mefarish explains, Amar halachi ben Nazir, diavolpi chedemei chatas merabim behen yipol nadavas. We said vasul leika el ben Nazir. So it says when it comes to Chavi Kinim Shabbatara Shehin Ba'oil V'Yarid. So when it comes to this din, there's a din oil V'Yarid that it depends on the wealth of that individual, what type of carbon is brought. So it's an oil V'Yarid. So when it comes to these Chavi Kinim Shabbatara, as we continue Chavav and Aleph, Shefrishu Mois L'Kinehem. So here, similar to the case of the Nazir, you're a mafresh, you designated money in order to be able to purchase these karbanos, says the Mefarish, v'achar kach hashiru. So you had birds, because you were poor. And then after you became rich, kegoyim mitzayra, im chayve chatas. So when it comes to mitzayra, he's mechuyev to bring a chatas, v'oil lahen, im ratzel haisav lahen, v'havim mehen chatas behem yovi. So instead of a chatas oif, he could bring a behema if he has more wealth. So he was originally poor, so he designated these birds. And then he became rich. So ratzel havi behen chatas behema yavi. Oilos behema yavi. So we see the same din, that if he wants, he could upgrade these monies from birds to an animal. And he doesn't have to, obviously he doesn't have enough money probably to be able to buy two animals, because he only had enough money to buy two birds, but he can buy one, and it would be enough. It would be okay. Even though the chatas is monies mixed in with that money, he could buy the entire thing for an olos behema. And then the Gemara says, which is going to be the question, Mace, let's say he dies, v'hayloi mois stumin yipul nadava. So we see the same thing. We see again that all the money is given to nadava. We're not concerned that there's chatas mixed in with it. So our answer is Tani Nazir v'chavi kinin de damule. So you're right. I'm not saying that this is the only case of Nazir, but it's anything which is similar to it. We'll see what's coming to exclude, but the idea, which let's go straight to TB2, Be'elu karbanos nemer halacha demais stumin yipol nadava. So we said by Nazir, and also a chavi kinim, because they're similar to one another. Why are they similar to one another? Because they are similar since they both have the multiple karbanos for one single obligation. So the Mitzayra has to bring 2 karbanos. This Nazir has to bring 3 karbanos. So, but those karbanos are all linked to one thing. So therefore, because of that, that's the reason why the din is that we have a halacha Moshe Sinai that it works, that you could actually give it all as an oila, as a nadava, even though there's chatas which is mixed in. Lafuki mahadasanya, which comes to exclude. Now we understand this case in which we're going to see it's 2 separate things. Misha hayam mechuyev chatas. So you have a person that's chayev, for whatever reason he has to bring a korban chatas. And he says, haralei oila. He says, I'm going to also bring an ola, which is an olos nadava. He's not bringing the ola because he has to, and it's not linked to the chatas. The hifresh mois, and he just says this money is l'chayvasi, for my obligations. Ratzul havi behen chatas behemul yavi. Os behema lo yavi. He cannot now take the money and just put it into one thing. He's not allowed to do that. Mace, let's say he dies, and the reason is, as we said, because these are two separate obligations. Look at the Mefarsh. Lafi sheish leimer shema shem oil chalehen havi oilos behema. You can't say that. Shema l'shem chatas mafresh, because maybe that money was for the chatas. Oisa hamois v'leisa hutakana. Kamashamon the hachi hu gabi nazir the damile the chayv chatas oila bevasachas. The way he explains it happens at the same time. The hasamu di'am halacha tiyipul nadava. That's why we say as a halacha Moshe Sinai that you could give it all as a nadava. It's not the same thing. These are two totally separate obligations. Therefore, that's why it has to be thrown Liam Hamelach. Says Taisus. So he says as follows. For example, so he ain't non-kosher fats. And then he has a totally different thing. He wants to bring carbon on os nadava. Now he has two chiyuvim. So v'sarch ian demaishna, first wide line. B'shem yesh leimer ki amar b'lashin zel l'chayvasi mashma. When he said harihu l'chayvasi l'chol mashu chayiv, whatever I'm obligated for, hilchach. Therefore, hafrasha haisa l'shneihem, the separation of monies were for both of these karbanos. That's why you can't bring one carbon. For the kinim, mash meshaper lemixas niziruso o lemixas sarasai. V'od yeshul chalek. You can also make a distinction. Heichad dehifresh niziruso o litzarasai. B'chol karbanos nazir v'yoledas o saras b'nei chad bagta. This is the one chad bagta. It's one obligation. L'kach yochol havi mitchila mikol demei hakain. Pray the achas, or machatas, or oil. No chatas oil. That's why you can bring either a chatas, or in this case, ipul nadava. It's completely as a nadava. Abel hacha the mechayiv chatas mechelu shachav oil nadura lav b'nei chad bagta. It's not the same thing. Whereas again, my first is not b'vasachas. Ein yochol havi mikul machas mehem. That's how he explains. Let's look at question 9. You can't do it. You're not doing it. So Maishna, when it comes to a Nazir, so this is how he writes it. Since when it came to this case, this situation of the chatos for eating chaylev, so he said l'chol vasi, mashma tfei l'chol mashu chayiv, whatever I'm obligated here for havarshasol haisel shneim davka. So it's interesting. It's not really because of the situation of these. They have two different things, but just because you use the language of l'chol vasi. The second teretz is the one which is more understood, to me at least. Karbonos naziros v'sras v'kiyotzeboy b'nei chad bagtehin. It's one thing. That's why you can bring one carbon. They're not the same. They're two separate things. That's why you cannot bring from one of them. You cannot bring an olus nadava from one of them because the chatas is more inside of it. Okay. Let's see if there's another question here. Okay, weiter. Omer Rav Ashi, Hadi Amrit, that which we said, Mifarshim Loi, that this is only by Mois Stumin that we say this din. But if it's Mois Mifarashim, no, says the Mefarish, Gabi Mois, Shim Hayim Mifarashim. If you said that this money is for a chatas, we said it goes to the Yamamelch, the Demei Oyla Yikru Oyla. Lo Teima Doi Havi Mifarashim. Don't tell me literally that that it was not specified. We're going to see this in the Gemara. Even if you say this for my obligation, harihin mefarashin, it's still considered to be mefurashin, even if all you did was say l'chavasi. So let's look in the back of the Gemara. Lo tema diamar l'chavas l'chatasi ve'elu l'asi ve'elu shalami, because that certainly is moist mefurashin. Ela feel aimer elu l'chatasi l'asi l'shalami. You didn't say ve'elu ve'elu ve'elu, but you just said these are for chatas and ola and shlamim mifrashin hand. That also is enough that it's considered to be like separate, and therefore, again, if it's for the chatas, it has to demei chatas is yelchel yam melach. So if we look in the mafarsh, the hechidami stumin, yomi yipul nedava, kigan shafrishin biyachat stam. If according to this, you just literally just said stam. You didn't really say anything out of your mouth. You just took the money and that was it. You just designated this money, but you didn't say a word. So then it's considered to be moistumin. In that situation, it's yipul nedava. But even by just saying the words elu l'chatasi l'asi l'shalami is enough already. It's considered to be moist mefurashin. Don't say it's only until you say that. Even if you said less, all you said was, this is for my chayiv, harahin kimefurashin. So even that alone, you didn't even say the words ol chata shlom of anything, but you just said elu chavasi, which is similar to the Gemara we just had before. How elu chavasi is how we can understand the first pshat, how we're machalik. That's considered to be mois mefurashim, and therefore says the mafarish, fine, that's it. Amarava, hadi amran moistumin yipul nadava. That which we said that the money goes to nadava. If again it's just you just separated the money without saying much. So im nafla demechatas b'neihem. Let's say demechatas falls in between them. What does that mean? Says the mafarish, im nevad o nifrad kishir demechatas b'neihem. Let's say it got lost, the amount of money of a chatas from in it. So let's say you had this big pool of money, but the amount of money which was enough to purchase a chatas, that was, let's say, lost. So that's what happens, harahin kimefurashim. At that point, we say the rest of it, says the mafarish, v'shar lo yipol nadava. Maybe b'demei chatzin oila demei chatzin shlomim b'loy lechem. So you can no longer just bring an olas nadava, but rather you have to spend half of it for an ola and half of it for shlomim, as we said, because he's not a. In this case, it's below lechem. We don't bring bread. Okay. All right. So fine, and we said that this whole reason is because if, let's say, she's the one that designated it, but then her husband was mefer, so she's not a Nazir anymore. So that's why it's not kape Nazir. That's why you don't bring lechem. Okay, so this is a great chiddush, that the only time we say that there's a chiyuv, that there's a halach moshe mesina, is only if all the money's still there. But if some of the money, which is equivalent to the mechatas, is lost, so then at that point we don't say halach moshe mesina, it's all yipul nadava, but rather it's split half ola and half shlomim without lechem. As we continue to chaf vava midbeis, tanya kavasa de Rabbi. So we're going to now say something which will support that which we just said in the sheet of Rabbi. Elu l'chatasi, if a person says this is for a chatas, v'shar l'shar nazirasi, and the rest will be for my naziros, demei chatas yelchiyam melach, because according to the second lashon, that's already enough. It's moist mefurashim. V'shar yavi chatziv l'oil v'chatziv l'shlomim, and the din is, and it's split. Umualan b'kulan. There's a din me'ila on all of them, says Mefarish, b'chol hashar, on the rest of the money. The b'shar yesh oila, uva oila ika me'ila. When there's a din an oila, there is a din me'ila. However, in mu'alan b'miksasan, says Mefarish, dikal meimer shel shlomenhin. If, let's say, it's part of it, so it's shaykh that you could say that part of that money is for the shlomim. So therefore, it's only once it's actually an ola, at that point there is a din me'ila. However, the reason says the Mefarish, Shlomim leikim il if neizrikas damim. There is no din of me'ila before the blood is sprinkled when it comes to a carbon shlomim. Okay. Elu lasi, so that's if a person says the language of elu l'chatasi. Now the Gemara says elu olasi. A person says not, so he designated that part of it is already removed for the chatos, so it's almost like, again, it was lost, it was taken out, and that's the reason why it's split. Elu olasi, if you say, I'm taking money out for an ola of a hashar lishar nazirasi, and the rest of the money is for the rest of my naziris, which is for the shlomim and the chatas, so devei oila yavi oila. Umualan behen, because as we said, when it comes to oila, there's a din meila. The shar yipul nadava, and the rest is yipul nadava, which is a great chiddush. Says the Ran, says rather the Mefarsh, the chol heichen and ma'urav chatas b'nehen kistumen dami, because the din is, since there's chatas mixed in, we still call it stumen, which is a tremendous chiddush. Umualan v'kulan v'inwan b'miksasan. Again, because it's possible to shlomim, so inwan b'shlomim. So there's no me'ila by shlomim, so therefore there's no me'ila by miksasan. Okay, so that's a tremendous chiddush. The chiddush is that the only time we say that it's yipul nedava is only in a situation where some of the money is chatas money inside, which you would think is counterintuitive. But if the chatas money was removed, then we no longer say this halacha moshe mesin. I'd rather it has to be split 50-50. Weiter. Rav Huna Merav Lo Shanu Ela Mois. The only time we say this is when it comes to Moistumin. That's the halacha moshe Sinai. Behema. Let's say he has animals. So then Harihi Kimafareshas. That has the din of Kimafareshas. Says the Farsh. Why? She'im Mace. Says the Farsh. She'im Mace. Let's say dies. V'niach Gimel Behemas. At least 3 animals. Harihi kimefareshas. It's as though he designated each one for a certain carbon. Mishum de'isbe heker, because it's recognizable. Dahach dahavin akeva l'tzarchatas. I mean, again, if it's a behema, each animal is for a certain carbon, and if it's a nekeva is a chatas, v'hai dahavi zachar oila, and therefore the kevis is obviously an oila, because an oil is a zachar and a chatas is a nekeva. V'hai dahavi ayil. Right? Ben Beis Shanim L'Tzarach Shlomim. So you see clearly, even if you didn't say anything, if you have 3 different types of animals, and each of those animals is specifically earmarked to be brought as a carbon, whether it's, again, a chatas, which has to be a female animal, when it comes to an ol, which is always a male animal, and when it comes to a shlomim, which is an ayil, so these are different animals. Even though you didn't say anything, it's k'mefarashim. Chatas Thomas with shlomim yikribu kedivri mastisa. Amrav Nachman Hadi Amrina Behema Harihi k'mefarashes. That which we said that an animal is like it's designated. Lo shana ela tamima. That's only in the situation if the animal is a tamim, which means it takes upon itself now a din of kedushas aguf, because it could be brought on the mizbech of a oilos of a balas mum. If this animal is a mum, harihi kastuma, because who says necessarily that you're going to end up using this animal? You can't. It's a mum. So therefore, that is the chiluk. We look at question 2, TA1 rather. Hifresh behema l'nazirus umeis im dina kimefreshas o kastuma. So the answer is, as we just saw, TA1. Tamima is kimefrashim. Balmum kastumin. Okay, TA1. So that's what the din is. Actually, let's look at the I keep saying the Ran. I was just learning the Dharm. And let's look at Taisus over here. Dira Maskal Abba Behema. It says V'im Timer Kivan Demar Behema Doli Chazel and Nazir Bahakrava Kin Mafarshinan El Kigain Shloisha Parim or Shloisha Seirim. So Taisus says, let's say we're actually talking about, you don't have 3 different types of animals. They have 3 parim or 3 seirim, and you're going to end up selling them. So mali bali mum mali tamimim. What's the chiluk? You're not going to use them anyway. Ki heichen bali mumin choshev stumim hachanami b'tamimim, because you're not going to use them anyway. V'yesh loimer de tamimim v'adayaf agav do yichaz l'hakarav l'nazir kol echad d'mei. Even though you cannot use them anyway for the for any of these karbanos, mikol makom chale kedushas haguf. The enu niftis blo mum. The din is that it cannot be poided without a mum. Question 10. Tifrish gimel parim o seirim, which is not what the mafar said, but again, then it was pashit. But let's say you separated 3 parim, and you don't use a par for achatas ol or shlomim when it comes to the din of a nazir. So, maishna balimumin mitamimim the el mafarashim el kastumim. So he says tamimim kivan deboit mumim with dice. It has a kedushas aguf. So therefore, you have to have a mum to be pointed. V'ika shehil zman orach. It takes time. Chashinan denasan libel hasker shem chatas al achs mehem lo birer. Maybe during that time you may have designated a name of chatas on one of them and you didn't specify. You could sell it right away. Then we're not concerned you really did anything, because if it's something that can be immediately sold, so there's less of a likelihood that you labeled it as something. Which is why we said that when it comes to a balmum, harihi kastuman. But when it comes to bars of silver, no, or gold. Says the Mafarish, let's say you have 3 pieces of silver. That's considered to be that it is actually designated. This bar of gold is for chatas, this one's for an oil, this one's for a shlomim. You designate it that way. Haniach gimel chatichas kesef. So that money, because one of those bars of gold was designated for chatas, so therefore it has to be thrown to the Yamamelech. Even when it comes to silver, says the Mafarish Kestumen Dami. It's considered to be just like stumen, because it's comparable to like money. As we said, if you have this big pool of money, so it's kastumin. So the fact that you have these bars of silver shouldn't be any different. If you have these piles of wooden beams, so then that already is different. That is considered to be kimifurashim. That one's for a chatas, one board is for an ol, one's for a shlomim. Amli Rav Shimi Barashi wa Papa. My tamai do rabbanan di'amar mois v'lei behema. So what's the reason of the Rabbanan? Because they say it's only money. Do we say this halachah Sinai? V'lo behema, v'lo nascha, mois, v'lo savra. So it's got to be money and not beams. So clearly, again, according to him, the halacha is only by money and nothing else. El miyata mois v'lo oifais. Why don't you say the same thing? Maybe the halachah Sinai is by money and not by birds. And even if it's stam, maybe you should automatically consider to be kimafurashim, and we don't say halacha mashmir Sinai if you have just birds that are designated. The chitem hachinami, that when it comes to, if you just designate 3 birds, you say nothing. El hadiyam rav chis that ain't hakinim mafurashim. It says that these kinim are not considered to be misparashais. So the din is that they are considered ella either at the time of the purchase, or when the kohen brings the carbon. So I thought you said it's only money. So only way a kohen could say this bird is the ola and this is the chatas, right? Is at the time when he brings the carbon. It's clear it's stumim, because if it was mefurashim, then how could the kohen say this? They're all mixed up and wouldn't be able to bring a carbon. So Shema Minah, it's stumim. It's very clear that even when it comes to birds, it's stumim. So even though it's different from mois, so even though it's not necessarily the same thing as mois, the same thing should still apply. So again, that a kohen is allowed to say this one is for a chatas, this one is for an oila. So how is he able to do that? It must be because it falls into the category of stumim. Because if it was considered to be mifurashim, then we would say that maybe it's all mixed up together, and he wouldn't be able to make that declaration. So we see clearly that the din is not explicitly dafka by money, but it could also apply to ofos as well, that we still can say it's considered to be stumim, and that's yipul l'nadava. The Gemara is going to continue with this on the next daf. Ad kan.